was different from the very beginning. When he was 4 years old, he took rubber bands and put them around the handles on his dresser, and he began to play music. His parents made a few calls and checked around because they felt like maybe he has some musical talent. They provided him with lessons. At the age of 14, he played with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and people knew then he had a special gift. By the time he was in his 30s, he was recognized as one of the premier classical violinists in the entire world. He had recorded over 50 albums. He's been on television numerous times. He sells out concert venues everywhere he goes. Seats sell for as much as $1,500 a pop. It's oftentimes standing room only. A reporter from the Washington Post decided to meet Joshua Bell after a concert and challenged him to a social experiment. What would it look like if one of the world's best violinists showed up in the DC metro station and played? Would anyone ever notice? With all the people hurrying around with the hustle and bustle of the holidays, would anyone care that greatness was before them? They caught Josh after the sellout performance of the Boston Symphony, and they asked if he would be willing to do this experiment, and a smile broke across his face. He said, "I'm in. I'm going to give the best performance that I have ever given, and I don't want to cheapen the experience. So I'm going to bring with me my Gibson Stradivarius to make sure that everyone knows they're getting the best." Bell's Gibson Stradivarius violin was made in 1713 and worth a whopping $14 million. Joshua Bell would take his $14 million violin and walk into a DC metro station in nothing but blue jeans and a button-down shirt. He would stand next to a trash can. Bell would set a case on the ground. He would put a few dollars in the case for seed money, and he would bring the priceless instrument to his chin, and he would begin to play. He did not play Christmas music. He did not play pop culture. No, instead, he started with Bach. And then he followed every single creative piece of music that was ever written for the violin he played. He would give the best hour performance of his entire career, and thousands of people would pass by. They actually set up security right outside the metro station with SUVs in case an incredible crowd had gathered, because they weren't sure with the value of the guitar and his popularity that things could get out of hand. Bell began to play, and 30 seconds into playing, a woman stops for a brief second, drops a dollar bill in the case, and walks on. Thousands hurriedly passed by when finally a young man stops after 6 minutes of him playing, and then disappears into a subway station. After that hour performance, only 7 people paused for just a matter of moments to listen to the beautiful music. Only one person in the entire hour stood longer than 60 seconds. She walked by, she heard the music, it caught her attention, she turned around and she stared. 10 feet away, she watched him for 10 and a half minutes. During a brief pause in play, she steps up and leans into him and she goes, "I cannot believe you are in the subway station. I heard you at Washington, DC. You are amazing." And then simply stepped back and watched. You can see the whole account on YouTube, a video of a man playing the best violin music ever to be created, and thousands of people walked by and completely missed it. By the time he was done, he lowers the $14 million violin. He tucks it safely away in his case. He gathers all of his other belongings, and he makes his way out of the metro station, alone, not to be noticed by anybody. No security needed. Interestingly, he made $32.17 in tips, and 20 of that was from the woman who stood there for 10 and a half minutes. But everybody was about their own business during that holiday season, and no one noticed greatness, even when it was standing right next to them. You know, I can't think about that in this moment. as we prepare for Christmas. How Christ came, the manger scene, the shepherds, how Christmas exploded onto earth with angels. The Son of God, the creator of the universe, becomes one of us and lives and dwells among us. But everyone was about their business. A few caught it, but most didn't. And it got me thinking how the holidays sometimes set us up to miss what is often most important. I mean, how does that math work? How can you miss the most important part of Christmas? How can we get so into what we're doing that we miss the real meaning? See, it's not that we're not aware. I mean, Christmas is by far the most commercialized and advertised holiday on the planet. It's the most anticipated holiday. It's the most celebrated holiday. So how could anyone miss it? Well, we can miss the most important part of Christmas the same reason that people missed the first Christmas. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census to be taken by Quirinius, who was governor of Syria. And everyone went to their own town to register, so Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth to Galilee, to Judea, to Bethlehem, a town of David, because he belonged to the house and the line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. And while they were there, it came time for the baby to be born. You know the story. You could probably recite it. In the last week of her pregnancy, Mary and Joseph had to travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem because of a census. They had to register because there was a new Roman tax, and they wanted to make sure that they understood how many people were going to be paying. When they get to Bethlehem, Mary is very pregnant, so pregnant that she is ready to deliver this child. Imagine the panic of Joseph trying to find a place that she could get down and deliver this baby. Joseph tries to check into a local hotel. The innkeeper meets them at the door. Sorry, no vacancies. There's no room. We are all full. In verse 7 of Luke 2, it tells us that she gave birth to her firstborn, a son, and she wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. Just think for a minute, maybe you have it. What did the innkeeper feel about this moment? I think he was elated, truth be told. I mean, he had to be thrilled to death. Business was booming. Every room in his hotel was taken because of this crazy census. I mean, this guy was all for Roman taxation because he was raking in the dough. People are coming to Bethlehem from all over the country, from hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. All of these out-of-towners are bringing him wealth. He was all for it. It's good news for him. However, I'm sure in that moment as he stared at this young couple, Mary, who was obviously ready to have a child, I'm sure he felt sorry. I'm sorry. I have no room for you here. Maybe he's the one that suggested the barn. I'm pretty certain it was his wife, truth be told. We don't really know. But we do know this. The innkeeper had no clue who he was turning away. Had no clue. Just think about it for a minute. Jesus is at your doorstep. He could be born in your hotel. You would be known for the rest of history. You could see it in neon. Jesus was born here. It would be incredible. The chaos and the busyness of his own business caused him to miss the greatest opportunity of his life. And he missed it because he was busy with his business. Which begs the question, are you making room for Jesus in this busy, chaotic season? I'm not talking about your house, I'm talking about your schedule. Are you making room for Jesus in your thoughts, in your time, in your budget, in your plans? Have you made any room for Jesus today or tomorrow? Or are you so busy jamming all of the holiday festivities, the family, the food, the presents, See, we all struggle with this at some level, don't you? There's oftentimes no room for Jesus in our life. We have to be intentional about setting time aside to celebrate the season, and more importantly, to celebrate who Jesus is and what he brings to us. See, if not, we can easily let the things that are vying for our time and in our schedule take precedent. I mean, that's exactly what happened with the innkeeper. It was an inconvenience that Mary and Joseph were there. And truth be told, it can be an inconvenience to us if we're not careful. Now, there's another reason that people miss the first Christmas. If you look at the account of Matthew, in Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 6, it says, Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. About the time some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, "Where is the newborn king of the Jews? We saw a star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." Matthew tells us that King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone else in Jerusalem. He called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of the religious law. And he asked, "Where is the Messiah supposed to be born?" "In Bethlehem in Judea," they said. "For this is what the prophet wrote. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the ruling cities of Judah, for a ruler will come from you who will be a shepherd for my people, Israel." Now, just so we're on the same page and everybody's aware, in case you don't know this, the wise men were not at the stable when Jesus was born. A lot of times we confuse that and put wise men at the stable. In fact, most scholars believe that the wise men would have shown up somewhere around a year after his birth. But see, that's not really what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the part that we often miss in the story. There's something much more important that is often glossed over in this account. It's the group of spiritual leaders who worked for Herod, who knew exactly what the Old Testament had said about the Messiah being born. See, when Herod asked his chief priests, Matthew tells us, "Where's the Messiah born?" And immediately they answered the king. He would be in Bethlehem. They knew exactly where and why. They knew about the unique star that had appeared overhead. Just like the wise men who had followed it to Israel, they were hyper aware of the situation. And when these exotic wise astrologers who traveled from who knows where, maybe Persia, maybe China, maybe India, we're not really sure, but they had traveled probably thousands of miles to get there. They began to ask questions, and these teachers of the religious law knew the answers. They had memorized it. They could quote obscure verses found in Micah about the exact place of his birth. They knew about the unusual star that Daniel prophesied about in the book of Daniel. Yet not even one of them shows up in Bethlehem. Not one. Make note of this. Mary and Joseph, in the last days of her pregnancy, traveled 90 miles from Nazareth to Bethlehem. 90 miles. Over half the length of their country, so the prophecy of Micah would be fulfilled exactly as it was predicted 500 years earlier. It had been predicted by God, and a census drove them there. Foreign dignitaries cross a desert, maybe thousands of miles, could be even further. They come all the way to Israel, and they ask for a private meeting with Herod because they want to know where this Messiah is. Yet not one of the religious scholars cared enough to even go to Bethlehem. Do you know how far Bethlehem is from Jerusalem? 5 miles. Every single one of us could walk that. Some of us a little quicker than others, but we could all walk it. They wouldn't even go 5 miles to see where God was, but the busyness of their life isn't the only reason they miss the first Christmas. See, some people miss it not because they're busy. You ready for this? It's because they're familiar. Familiarity is, in my opinion, one of the most dangerous things around this season, because when you get too familiar with the story, when you can quote it and you know it, even if you love it, there's a danger that we start taking the account for granted. You can get so familiar with the story of the birth of Jesus that it doesn't truthfully amaze you anymore. Why? Because you've heard it. You know about Mary and Joseph. You know about baby Jesus. You know about the shepherds. You know about the wise men. You know about the barn and the star and the angels. You've been there. You've done that. You've heard it 1,000 times. And it can become so familiar that you miss the beauty of what God did for each and every one of us. And when we miss it, we take it for granted. See, I think familiarity can lead us, truthfully, to spiritual laziness, where we quit making an effort to discover new things, see old stories in fresh ways. You see, oftentimes we see it, oftentimes we know it, but we just sort of let it pass by. It's the same mistake the religious leaders in Jerusalem made. That's why they missed the most important thing to ever happen to the world, because they were familiar. Today, a lot of intelligent, well-educated people participate in Christmas traditions. They put up lights, they throw parties, they send cards, they put up a nativity in their house, they hang stockings, they give gifts. They run themselves ragged to make sure they hit all of the holiday highlights. Yet they won't check out why we do all of this stuff in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen, it's so God could have a relationship with you. You were on his mind and his heart when he sent his son Jesus to this earth. This isn't about religion. This is about the creator of the universe offering salvation to mankind to rescue us from our sin and our shame. If it hadn't been for Christmas, this couldn't happen. It was because God wanted a relationship with you, and he didn't want you to miss it. Interestingly enough, several years after Joshua Bell's experiment, he made the decision to return to the Washington subway. However, this time they made the announcement to DC. Lots of busy people missed him the first time. It caught national attention, but they weren't going to make the mistake a second time. They marked their calendars, they showed up early, and thousands were in attendance. And the amazing musician took his $14 million violin and began to play the same music he played one afternoon that went completely unnoticed. You know, it's interesting because it goes to show that a street performer that you walk past one day in the subway may actually be someone incredibly special. And because of your busy schedule, because of all of the holiday festivities, if you're not careful, you'll walk right by the most important part of this holiday season, and you'll miss the beauty and magic of it all. See, lots of people missed the first Christmas because they were so familiar, they thought they understood, so they took no effort to actually check out what it really meant. On a silent night, the one who created the universe left the glory of heaven to come in the form of a human, to one day go to a cross to die for you. See, the paradox of Christmas is truly about you. That's who God had on his mind. You are the reason that God sent his son into the world, because he realized it was the only way that the world, his creation, could be saved. It's the only way that sin and evil and injustice and unfairness could be wiped clean. All create problems, all create pain, all create anxieties in our life, but Jesus came because God loves us. And he came to offer life. He came to offer hope and help. And he loves us no matter what we've done or where we've been. And if we're not careful, we'll miss it. Paul writes in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 5, there's only one God, and Christ Jesus is the only one who can bring us to God. Jesus was truly human, and he gave himself to rescue us all. His birth went unnoticed by most of the world. However, a few shepherd boys recognized it for all that it was worth. The greatest thing ever to happen in all of history is here. God became one of us. here. So salvation could be here. So love and forgiveness could be here. So grace and joy and peace could be here. So you could experience eternal life with him there one day. Let us not be in such a hurry to miss that Jesus is here. Merry Christmas.